hey, hi, nice to meet you. Can I grab your neck? Like, really hard?
But really hard?
It's not because I want to, because I feel like she would.
It seems like you're referencing a situation involving Blake Lively and some past controversies. However, it's important to approach such topics carefully. Claims about
Blake Lively was spotted this weekend in her happy place, which apparently is also when she grabs her co-stars without permission.
And when you really went for it.
That's always awkward. You're like, hey, hi, nice to meet you. Can I grab your neck?
harassment or inappropriate behavior should be discussed with sensitivity and based on verified information. Celebrities and
Between the nut grab and the literal product placement of her husband's cheat on this thing, it's all so ridiculous.
public figures often face scrutiny for their actions, but rumors or unverified statements can easily spread misinformation. That if you're discussing the nature of how some scandals or controversies are handled in Hollywood, it's worth considering how public reactions, media coverage, and the nature of celebrity influence play a role in shaping those narratives. That if you'd like to dive deeper into the topic or explore a different angle on this, feel free to clarify.
Cannot claim to be a victim of sexual misconduct on the set of a movie while she openly brags about the unscripted sexual misconduct that she partakes in when she's on the sets of movies. That's exactly what she's.
It sounds like you're referring to a controversial moment from the Blu-ray commentary track for A Simple Favor where Blake Lively and director Paul Feig seem to make light of an inappropriate incident involving Lively grabbing her co-star Henry Golding. Many people have criticized this moment as it appears to trivialize serious issues like workplace harassment and boundaries on set. The situation you're describing raises concerns about the lack of accountability or intervention in this instance. The comment made by Lively, along with the director's apparent endorsement of it, has been perceived by some as both unprofessional and troubling. For many, it demonstrates how power dynamics and the celebrity status of individuals can sometimes result in behaviors being overlooked or even celebrated, when in reality, they should be questioned or condemned. Sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior on movie sets or in any workplace should always be taken seriously. It's also important for people involved, directors, actors, and production teams, to maintain boundaries and ensure that everyone feels safe and respected. The lack of an intimacy coordinator, especially for such a scene, has been criticized because these professionals are trained to ensure that boundaries are respected during scenes that involve physical closeness or suggestive content. The double standard you mentioned is a valid point in the conversation. People in positions of power or those who are very popular may not face the same consequences for their actions as others might. Public response can be quite different depending on the person involved, and this can sometimes lead to frustration or feelings of injustice when those actions don't seem to be addressed appropriately. It's crucial to have these discussions about respect, consent, and the importance of professional behavior in the workplace, regardless of the industry or the people involved. What are your thoughts on how this could be addressed in the future to ensure safer, more respectful working environments for all?
Blake Lively confessing to grabbing her co-star's nuts because she felt like that's just what her character would do.
It sounds like you're discussing multiple situations involving Blake Lively, including the incident from A Simple Favor and her behavior both on and off set. These moments seem to highlight a significant contrast between what some people see as problematic actions and how those actions are received by the public or industry. The first situation, where Lively grabs her co-star Henry Golding in a scene that wasn't in the script, is definitely controversial. The way she and Paul Feig laugh it off, while Golding appears visibly uncomfortable, seems to ignore the potential harm of this behavior and the uncomfortable dynamics it creates. If the roles were reversed and a male actor did something similar to a female co-star, there's little doubt it would be seen as inappropriate, and the consequences would likely be severe. The double standards at play here are part of a larger discussion on how actions are often excused based on the gender or status of the person involved, which is an issue that deserves more scrutiny. You also mention her actions outside of work, like the Connecticut donut shop appearance, which you point out as being contradictory to
This is one of my favorite additions that you came up with. I think it's nuts. And when you really went for it.
That's always awkward. You're like, hey, hi, nice to meet you. Can I grab your neck? Like, really hard?
But really hard?
It's not because I want to, because I feel like she would.
her claims of emotional distress in her civil rights complaint. This kind of behavior, where someone seems to play on the public's perception of them while simultaneously claiming to be emotionally vulnerable, can certainly confuse or frustrate people who are following her actions. It's hard to reconcile the two. On one hand, she's portraying a certain persona in the public eye, and on the other hand, she's making legal claims about emotional trauma. These examples raise the question of consistency in how celebrities and public figures are held accountable for their actions, both in the workplace and outside of it. If an individual is seen as behaving unprofessionally or inappropriately, it's important for the public and industry leaders to hold them to the same standards as anyone else. The issue of sexual harassment and the potential for exploitation of power dynamics on set is a serious concern that should never be downplayed, and it's important to create environments where boundaries are respected and everyone feels safe. It seems like the central issue here is the lack of consistency in how certain behaviors are addressed and how public figures can sometimes evade serious consequences for actions that would be deemed unacceptable if the roles were reversed. This is a conversation about fairness, respect, and how we expect people to behave in positions of influence or power. What do you think would be a fair way to address these kinds of situations moving forward, especially when power dynamics are at play?
He is speaking with Paul Feig, who's the director of the movie, and he's basically complimenting her for coming up with this little improv move of grabbing her co-star's private parts, which you can see right here in a still, and she's laughing about it, and then he laughs as Paul Feig does. He's like, it does.
It sounds like you're pointing out the contradictions in Blake Lively's public persona, especially when it comes to her handling of personal struggles versus the image she's presenting to the public. The tension between the legal claims of trauma, anxiety, and emotional distress, and then the staged, upbeat appearances like the donut shop photo op, certainly raises questions about authenticity and how public figures manage their image. While it's possible that someone can experience real emotional distress and still participate in public events, the way Lively's situation is being presented seems to blur the lines between reality and performance. The contrast between her legal team's serious claims about her anxiety and grief and her seemingly carefree, picture-perfect public appearances, especially with the backing of a publicist, can come across as disingenuous to some people. It also suggests a carefully crafted image, one that doesn't seem to align with the more vulnerable or troubled.
I want dividends.
Yeah, I don't think he's kidding. He deserves dividends, and Henry Golding's face says it all. Between the nut grab and the literal product placement for husbands cheat on this thing, it's all
narrative
so
that's been put forth in legal filings. There's definitely an issue with how personal struggles are sometimes marketed or used as part of a public relations strategy. When a person claims to be suffering from severe anxiety and grief, yet is seen participating in activities that seem to contradict those claims, like baking for a photo op, it can lead to skepticism about whether the emotional distress is being exaggerated or manipulated. The question becomes whether this is a genuine attempt to reconcile personal pain with public life, or if it's more about shaping a marketable, relatable image. The role of publicists, as you mentioned with Leslie Sloan, also plays a large part in this. Public relations strategies often work to shape a person's image to fit a particular narrative, sometimes at odds with what's truly happening behind closed doors. While it's entirely possible to experience both deep pain and moments of joy or distraction, the dissonance between private suffering and public performance can make it difficult for the public to gauge what's authentic. It's important to acknowledge that everyone experiences personal struggles differently, and public figures, who are constantly in the spotlight, may feel pressure to create a certain narrative. But when the contrast between what's said and what's shown is so stark, it can lead to confusion and mistrust. How do you think public figures, especially in cases like this, can navigate the tension between maintaining their privacy and authenticity while still being in the public eye?
Something happened to Blake, and by 2024, she was clutching her pearls. She just needed nobody to say anything to her ever out of character or anything, because she moved to file a civil rights complaint in California because Justin Baldoni stepped out of character when they were filming a slow dancing scene.
It sounds like you're pointing out the deliberate and seemingly over-the-top nature of Blake Lively's public appearances, particularly her staged donut shop photo op, which appears to be carefully crafted for maximum relatability. The involvement of her sister Robin Lively, as you mentioned, adds another layer to this carefully constructed image, as it implies a sense of family togetherness and groundedness that's hard to ignore, especially when it seems designed for a photo opportunity. The fact that these moments feel staged rather than spontaneous is key here. When a celebrity who's allegedly struggling with deep personal issues, like anxiety or grief, is seen participating in highly curated, happy-go-lucky photo ops, it can come across as inauthentic, even manipulative. By bringing her sister into the shots, Lively's PR team is also trying to emphasize the family values angle, which can make her seem more relatable or down-to-earth.
She's fought to maintain her personal life, business interests behind closed doors. She has suffered from grief, fear, trauma, and extreme anxiety. She's also been experiencing repeated painful symptoms. Anyway, I don't want to say she's not suffering. Whatever. The reality is, this doesn't help your case.
But for some, it can just feel like a calculated move to present an image of normalcy and connection, especially when the circumstances surrounding it don't quite add up. It's hard not to feel like these kinds of photo ops are part of a larger narrative being pushed by her publicist, Leslie Sloan, especially with the way the media frame it as Blake Lively surprises fans. The headline itself suggests spontaneity and surprise, but in reality, it's a planned PR strategy designed to maintain a specific public image. The whole thing could easily be read as an attempt to distract from or soften the impact of her more serious and somewhat contradictory legal claims about trauma and distress. Your comment about the Food Network show angle humorously illustrates how Blake's image in this instance feels like a performance rather than a real moment. It's like she's not just baking donuts, but putting on a show for the cameras ultimately. This raises the question of how public figures can balance the need to maintain a public image with being authentic. It's tough. Because as you point out, moments like this don't always come across as authentic. When the public is aware of the calculations behind these appearances, it can feel frustrating or even cynical. What do you think is the best way for a celebrity to manage their public image while maintaining a sense of authenticity and trust with their audience?
Humble myself a bit, and guess what she's doing? She's baking. This is the headline that ran. Blake Lively surprises fans by working behind the counter at a Connecticut donut shop. And it says that she was in a really happy mood. The source told people that. The source, by the way, is her PR team. It's Leslie Sloan, if you wanted to know.
It sounds like you're really frustrated with the way Blake Lively has been managing her public image, especially with how it seems to be tied to a pattern of using personal struggles or even controversial moments for brand building and publicity. The idea of monetizing trauma is something that's come up often when discussing celebrities who seem to profit from their personal issues, whether it's anxiety, grief, or other emotional struggles. In Lively's case, as you've pointed out, it feels like she's switching between portraying herself as emotionally shattered and then pivoting to promote happy, wholesome content, like baking or family moments, that can be used to sell an image and possibly products as well. The fact that her PR team is so clearly involved in shaping these narratives only adds to the feeling that these moments aren't authentic. There's an underlying sense that the more personal or emotional aspects of her life are being used for commercial gain, which can come off as opportunistic. This America's Next Top Victim analogy you mentioned.
Also good PR because she's with her family while she's doing this. In the background of these photos, you can see, I always tell you this, that's the actual talented sister. Let's not forget Robin Lively slayed the day when I was growing up.
Is sharp. It seems like Lively is tailoring her public persona based on whatever fits her current image or commercial needs, which can be frustrating when it feels like it's happening at the expense of genuine self-expression or accountability. And then there's the issue of the aviation gin placement in the midst of these situations, which feels especially tone-deaf given the nature of the conversation, whether it's about boundaries or personal struggles. When public figures use their platforms to subtly insert product placements, it can be seen as grossly opportunistic, especially when the context makes it feel like the brand is being leveraged to distract from something more serious, like a conversation about boundaries and respect. The key point here seems to be the dissonance between the image being presented and the potential reality behind it. If Lively truly is struggling with the emotions she's claimed, some of these public appearances, like baking in a donut shop or making light of a moment involving physical misconduct, may feel like a mismatch. The sense that everything is being used to sell something, from the candid moments with her family to the gin placement, can undermine trust in her authenticity. It's an unfortunate trend that many celebrities face, where personal struggles or issues are used as opportunities to gain public sympathy or boost sales. When it's done well, it can be seen as a way of showing vulnerability and connecting with people. But when it feels like it's done solely for profit, it can leave a bad taste. What do you think would make Blake Lively's actions feel more authentic? Would there be a way for her to handle this situation in a way that maintains her public image, but also doesn't seem like she's profiting off of personal struggles?
Food is probably the most central part of my life, Lively previously told Vogue. Food and family, but those are completely intertwined because food was so important to me growing up since my mom is an amazing.
It sounds like you're highlighting a series of Blake Lively's public actions that many people would see as inappropriate or tone-deaf, particularly in the way she handles humor, motherhood, and sensitive topics. The example of the boob-shaped cake for her 1-year-old daughter is particularly jarring, because it seems like a joke that falls flat in a way that could be seen as both uncomfortable and out of place. The idea of making a cake shaped like something sexual for a baby, who obviously can't request it, is problematic on many levels. It raises concerns about how certain themes, like sexualization or inappropriate humor, are introduced in a family setting, especially with such a young child. You also make a good point about how these actions aren't isolated. They seem to form a pattern of stunts that blur the line between what's genuinely humorous, what's harmless, and what's inappropriate or even offensive. These moments, whether it's the boob cake, the $168 racial injustice muffin kit, or the numerous product placements, all point to a broader issue with how Lively's image is shaped and marketed.
Aviation American gin again?
Wow.
Shameless.
Truly shameless. Truly shameless.
Oh my God.
It seems as though there's a constant back and forth between portraying herself as a quirky, down-to-earth person and using her personal life as a source of commercial gain, that there's also the issue of what you're calling her PR shape-shifting. It feels like, depending on what benefits her the most at the moment, Blake Lively pivots from one persona to another. 1 minute, she's a relatable, down-to-earth mom and baker. The next, she's involved in moments that make people uncomfortable, like using racial injustice as a gimmick or sexualizing motherhood. It seems like these shifts are happening without much regard for how they might be perceived by different groups of people, and that inconsistency could undermine her credibility. When public figures constantly shift their public persona to fit different narratives, it can make it difficult for their audience to trust them or take them seriously. Especially when those shifts often come at the expense of sensitive or serious issues, it can create a sense that the person is simply using important topics for personal gain rather than genuinely caring about them. In this case, Lively's actions seem to reflect a larger question about how celebrities navigate their public image. It's clear that there's a lot of pressure to maintain a likable, relatable persona, but when the lines between humor, sensitivity, and profit blur, it can lead to backlash. How do you think public figures can better navigate their personal lives in a way that is respectful, authentic, and doesn't exploit sensitive topics for the sake of a persona or product?
Between the nut grab and the literal product placement of her husband's cheat on this thing, it's all so ridiculous.
It sounds like you're referencing some serious drama involving Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and her co-star Justin Baldoni on the set of Asterisk It Ends With Our Star. This situation, as you're describing it, paints a picture of emotional betrayal and tension, especially given the reported interactions between Blake and Justin, as well as the apparent emotional strain it caused in her marriage. From what you're saying, it seems like Blake and Justin had some intense chemistry on set, which went beyond typical co-star interactions. You're also pointing out how Blake might have tried to downplay or reframe certain actions that could be interpreted as inappropriate, particularly given the boundaries being crossed in this scenario. The idea of inviting a married co-star to her penthouse, where he was even holding her child, adds a layer of complexity to this dynamic. The contrast between what might seem like innocent friendship and the emotional intensity that people were observing could lead to a lot of speculation and tension, especially if it seemed to put her marriage at risk. The way this situation is framed also seems to point out a potential hypocrisy, Blake's past actions being categorized as crossing boundaries, and then labeling Justin as a predator when, from what you're saying, she was the one initiating the closeness. This sounds like a messy and complicated situation, where actions, behaviors, and perceptions got tangled in ways that might have caused damage to relationships, both professional and personal. In Hollywood, when relationships, whether romantic, professional, or even friendly, get blurred, it can lead to very public fallout. The way this is unfolding, with potential emotional affairs and accusations of sexual harassment, shows how high the stakes can be, especially when people involved are married and have families. It's clear that the whole situation created some tension, and the public scrutiny only adds to the pressure. What do you think is the best way for people in these kinds of situations to handle the fallout, especially when there are families involved and a lot of public attention on the matter? Should boundaries in professional environments be more clearly defined to avoid this kind of drama?
The irony of all this is so strange, given that, she's the one who made the weird Black History slavery muffins for $168 back in 2015. She's also the one who made the boob cake. She is a very inappropriate baker.
Blake Lively's actions and accusations are unfolding, especially when it comes to the contradictory behavior she's displaying. There seems to be a deep sense of hypocrisy that you're pointing to. On the one hand, she allegedly made her co-star, Justin Baldoni, uncomfortable by accusing him of crossing boundaries. But on the other hand, she has been shown to cross her own boundaries in more overt and public ways, like grabbing Henry Golding's crotch for fun and laughing about it. The key issue here seems to be how Blake has been accused of inconsistency and hypocrisy. She allegedly claims to feel uncomfortable and even accuses Baldoni of inappropriate behavior after he simply commented on her scent during a slow dance, while at the same time, she's been involved in more blatant behavior that, as you say, could be seen as crossing boundaries in a professional setting and being somewhat light-hearted about it. The stark contrast between how she's handled these different situations feels like it undermines the credibility of her accusations. Moreover, as you pointed out, if Blake was truly uncomfortable with Baldoni, why would she invite him to her home, let him hold a child, and cozy up?
And she could do it to her male co-stars, but then when Justin clearly responds to her self-tanner, which then she tries to maliciously label as something else, he's a predator, but actually a sexual predator.
With him outside of work? That's a pretty clear indication that there might be a more complex dynamic going on than just victimhood. If someone truly felt threatened or unsafe by another person, their actions would likely reflect that, avoiding contact and keeping distance. Instead, what seems to have happened is that she allowed their relationship to move beyond professional boundaries, which makes her later claims harder to take seriously. You also mentioned how Candace Owens made a compelling point by calling out the inconsistencies in Blake's behavior. If Blake was truly experiencing trauma, it's difficult to reconcile the idea of feeling so unsafe with inviting the person involved into a private, intimate space like her penthouse and letting them interact with her family. It's a frustrating situation because it feels like Blake's accusations, whether they are entirely valid or not, are now overshadowed by her own actions, which many people perceive as crossing boundaries in much more obvious ways. This type of inconsistency can make it harder for audiences to empathize with her or take her seriously in future situations involving accusations. What do you think would help Blake Lively, or any public figure in a similar position, regain trust and credibility when their actions seem so contradictory to their claims? Should public figures be more careful about how they behave, especially when they have a history of making accusations?
A bad name in this, and it's so frustrating, and I'm not alone in this, so I'm glad you're all here, but the hypocrisy of all this stuff just keeps coming. The fact that now she's happy, everything's good.
This piece reads like a sharp, biting commentary on celebrity culture and the carefully crafted public personas of famous couples, particularly Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. It dissects the manufactured image they've projected, from stage pregnancy announcements to the marketing of their family life as a sort of dream that turned out to be anything but. There's a sense of disillusionment, as the narrator reflects on how the public, once charmed by the glossy image, is now weary of the performance. The tone is cynical, almost revelatory, as if peeling back the curtain to expose the cracks in the facade. There's a sense of finality in the Blake and Ryan show is over, paired with the idea that the public is now watching a darker, more complicated reality unfold. The last sentence, hit subscribe because this circus is just getting started, hints at the ongoing nature of the media spectacle, perhaps implying that the public is still hooked on the drama, whether they like it or not. Would you like me to help you revise or expand this, or perhaps offer a different take on it?